They were the heroes from the future, teenagers protecting the universe from those that would sow the seeds of chaos. Each had unique powers and abilities, and though they often had their differences, they came together to save the day as the Legion of Superheroes. Now, you can be a part of their adventures and learn the history of the future in the Legion Clubhouse.
This week on the Legion Clubhouse, man, 1986, right? It was kind of a thing. You had to be there.
Cosmic Boy number 1. Those Who Will Not Learn the Lessons of History. Published December 1986. Written by Paul Levitz with art by Keith Giffen and Ernie Colón. Synopsis. Cosmic Boy visits the past to find the secrets of Superboy.
So we are into a 4-issue miniseries called Cosmic Boy. This is a spinoff from Legends, which apparently Cosmic Boy appeared in Legends, but we are not reading Legends. So that does bring up a little bit of confusion for people who are just jumping in, although it does kind of make sense because the issue starts out with Cosmic Boy after some kind of a battle. I don't know if that's necessarily important, but he's being attacked by a mob of people who are supposedly turned against superheroes, and Cosmic Boy needs Night Girl to come in and save the day.
Yeah, this actually takes place after Legends number 2, which, for all intents and purposes, is the first crossover of the post-Crisis DC universe. So the Legends crossover is Darkseid sending his agents to Earth to turn people against superheroes, including Glorious Godfrey, who is a hypnotic guy, to use his power to turn public opinion against the superheroes.
I really like, even though Glorious Godfrey doesn't appear in this issue, I like Glorious Godfrey as this portent of things to come with just media, especially 1980s media, especially when you have the rise of right-wing media in the 1980s, when we carry that forward to today with social media, and you see a bunch of Godfreys all over the internet these days. And so a part of me really kind of likes that Godfrey, even though he's using his powers to manipulate people, he's really just using the media to manipulate people. And I think that somebody out there who wants to study manipulation in media, in addition to studying what Goebbels did and what other people, including people today, did, I think a chapter in that history of manipulating media should be focused on Glorious Godfrey and how he was fictionalizing stuff, but kind of showing the world this is really what was going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, and it is interesting to see, this kind of populism, this kind of demagoguery is everywhere now, but I feel like Glorious Godfrey is not the most obvious shot at televangelism.
Oh, no.
That would be Reverend Jeremiah from Elementals. But he's clearly a shot at the televangelists of the 80s.
Yeah, and mainly because he's got the big hair, the white suit, which you see a lot in televangelism of the day. But if I'm remembering my 1980s Glorious Godfrey, he wasn't coming in as televangelism. He was coming in as, for lack of a better word, your Rush Limbaugh's, but looking better and on television.
He was, again, they were not overtly making him a televangelist, but he was basically preaching. He would go on shows. I think they actually used
Lindsey Graham today. Put Lindsey Graham in a suit, and that would be
Ted
Glorious
Koppel
Godfrey.
And Nightline on specifically by name in Legends number 2 or 3.
Yeah, and I think that I wonder if that is part of the Frank Miller effect that's going on here from Dark Knight Returns. Television and media play a big role in how the writers, and in this case Paul Levitz, are conveying the story in a grandiose kind of way. Frank Miller did it in The Dark Knight Returns, as they're talking about the both sides-isms, as they're talking about, vigilantism, as they're talking about whatever it is, and putting in the public opinion. You don't need a crowd of people standing outside of a building holding up signs and shouting as, Superman walks down the street. You've got television to do that. And we see and I don't know if it somehow became policy or if it was just the fact that The Dark Knight Returns did it so impactfully. But we start to see these just like square, in this case, they're kind of elongated rectangles, almost Instagram sized, television frames that are conveying the story as either we're flipping through channels or as somebody is telling the news, in this case, WGBS, or I'm sorry, Wiz TV commentary. And so I find that just fascinating because it's been done multiple times, especially in the 80s leading up to the 90s with this television effect.
I definitely think that this is a direct result of The Dark Knight Returns. And they do specifically use Reagan as well, the sitting actual president. And I feel like that's to try and snap back against the arguments that the Marvel universe was, quote unquote, realistic. And the DC universe was archaic and had made up cities like Metropolis and Coast City. But Legends is also where we get the Suicide Squad, which is now one of DC's bigger properties. And I feel like just spinning out of Legends is a good 15, 20 years ahead of its time, because they destroy the Silver Age Justice League and have to rebuild. They take Captain Marvel, and in the very first issue, they frame him for murder, which gets us into the dark and grim, gritty, that doesn't actually go anywhere, but the real grimdark Roy Thomas reboot of Captain Marvel circa 86.
I know I have the Legends issues somewhere. I just don't remember the whole story off the top of my head, but I know I had it because they had some really cool covers of the time.
Yes, it was amazing. And it also had John Byrne doing some of his first DC art. It introduced, or in this case, reintroduced, it was the quote unquote first appearance of Wonder Woman in the New Earth continuity. In issue 6, Wonder Woman just pops up in the middle of a battle in Washington, D.C. And out of that, we rolled the George Perez Wonder Woman relaunch of 87. So
I do find it funny, though, that this is like definitely a post-crisis story where Superman has been rebooted. And if you're reading all the other DC comics, you know that there was no Superboy. And so all of the Legion adventures, have never happened in this new rebooted timeline. But I find it funny when Cosmic Boy, not Cosmic Goy. Well, I mean, he could be. He could be, but Cosmic Boy goes up.
That's what Jim calls him.
As him come and turn on and off his flight ring on Saturdays.
Cosmic Shabbos Goy is who he is.
There you go. So Cosmic Boy goes up to Superman, and Superman's, I don't know who you are. And knowing that this is post-crisis, that's all well and good. But I find it funnier if you just think that, super hypnotism, it will never backfire on anybody until you go back to the past and you meet Superman, who has no recollection of who these people are because of super hypnotism. It would be funnier that way, but of course that's not the case.
I don't know if that's funny. That's just kind of cruel.
I mean, that's the whole point of cosmic hypnotism. So he's not supposed to know what happens in the future. So it would make sense that unless he's in the future, he doesn't know who any of the Legion members are. But somehow he knows that if his little statues start flashing in his little clubhouse, that he's supposed to go to the future. But whatever.
I don't think he has statues anymore.
No, because Superboy doesn't exist in this world.
Exactly.
And so that's interesting too.
I find it, the thing that I honestly expected you to talk about first is that you hate the time travel aspect here, because this kind of, the way I understand your arguments, I feel like this kind of breaks the rules of time travel that you prefer, because this changes the universe in 1986, and then the changes in time sort of ripple backward and forward to the point where the Legion has not yet caught up to 1986.
See, that's because at this point in time, Matthew, we have split off into 1986, an alternate universe where Biff Tannen has married your mother and killed your father. So here's a great way to think of time travel if you want to think of ripples in how it affects time, right? Mm-hmm. So 1986 is in the middle of a pond. The pond is nice and clear. You could move forward and get to the right side of the pond, and that would be the future. Or you could move backwards and you could get into the past, right? If you drop a big stone right there in the middle of the pond, it's going to take a little bit of time for those ripples to reach the right or left side, the future or the past. And so that's how, and again, Back to the Future, I think, is probably one of the better time travel depictions of this, where Marty has to, he messed up getting his parents together, and if he doesn't fix it, he's going to disappear from the timeline. Kind of the same thing that's going on here. Certainly by 86, Back to the Future has already been out, and so people are looking at that as, I don't want to say the de facto way that time travel works, because there was, what was the one where the guy rode his motorcycle through time and became his own grandpa?
Time Rider, The Adventures of Lyle Swan.
Yeah.
I love that movie. That's a great movie.
It's pretty crazy how it turns out. But no, the fact that it takes time for time to change makes a lot of sense in this case. And that is what both Cosmic Boy and Night Girl are experiencing here.
Yeah, we're seeing the beginnings of it. The Rip Hunter Time Master series that redefines New Earth time travel will be out probably a year after this. But this is interesting, because this is really the point where they've talked about the crisis, and we've talked about, that paradox of Supergirl's death and the things that have or haven't happened. This is the seeds of everything that you like about the Legion, because this is the point where they realize the future has to change. And because of that, when it does, eventually they'll say, oh, the future has to change again. Let's just reboot it from the ground up.
Yeah, and that's 0 hour.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, and that's not that far off. 94 is only about
no, it's less than a decade, right? So, and there's a lot of stuff to get through. I think, we could do a whole thing about reboots and talk about that. I think the idea behind Crisis on Infinite Earths was a good idea to try to retcon all continuity and bring it into a modern time frame, instead of Superman being 50 years old, 75 years old, and they want him to remain 30 forever. The problem with the Crisis is they really messed up Hawkman, and that's what kind of caused all the ripples to necessitate 0 hour. The problem
which then caused the ripples to necessitate Infinite
Wave
Crisis,
Rider and all that stuff,
which then caused ripples which required Final Crisis, which then caused ripples which required the Flashpoint retcon.
Well, so after 0 hour, to be honest, there's two things that in my opinion DC has stood fast on, and that's the reason why things keep messing up. The first one is that Batman has always been around. They've never really, even though Batman doesn't age,
he does.
Batman is still the 1939 Batman in all incarnations. It's like the universe warps around Batman because he's Batman. He's got a contingency for everything, right? So if time changes, he's got some device that allows reality to warp around him.
I will give you $5 to never say that again.
No, I'm going to keep using it.
Every time you say that, you just sort of wish a little more of it into reality.
No, because that's exactly what's happened. That's exactly what's happened.
And Darkseid go, ugh.
DC doesn't know how to reconcile. And I mean, they tried with Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo's Batman kind of reorigin story. But they have not really, in my opinion, been able to successfully reboot Batman like they've rebooted Wonder Woman, like they've rebooted Superman multiple times. It's just always Batman. We just continue Batman stories without breaking them. And I think that's the biggest mistake in all of these things. Had they not tried to reconcile Hawkman into one guy, I don't think we would have had the problems of 0 hour and all that stuff. I think what they probably would have said was, oh, remember when Superman crashed to Earth in 1986? Oh, yeah. And then, 10 years later, that 1986 event would be 1992 or, whatever it may be. And so they can just shift it, just like Iron Man was in Cambodia and then Vietnam and then, Gulf War I, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they just keep pushing that origin story without having to really reboot Iron Man each time.
The worst part of it? They had, in the very first Hawkman story in May of 1940, they had the mechanism that could have, because the whole thing about Carter Hall is that he is a reincarnation of Prince Khufu. Mm-hmm. And eventually, somebody who shall remain nameless because he had 4 good ideas and just keeps doing them over and over.
Jeff Johns.
I'm not going to say his name.
If I
but
say his name 3 times, will he appear on the podcast?
If you say his name 3 times, we both get retconned, is what happens. And that's
Stargirl will be fine though.
The reincarnation on another planet thing allowed them to do a Kryptonian Hawkman, and that allowed them to do a Hawkman, on different. It's really cool, and it finally did break the Earthnocentrism. Copyright, major spoilers. The Earthnocentrism of Legion stories and Superman stories, and it's a really, really clever twist, and it's been there since the very beginning. And if somebody at DC had thought of that in '86, you could just go, oh, well, there you go. But as it is now, I literally know there are 3 Hawkmen who technically never existed in this era, '86 to about, I think it's '90 when Hawk World debuts.
Yeah.
And it's terrible. It's stupid. And none of this has anything to do with Cosmic Boy, except for the fact that Cosmic Boy now knows 1986 is wrong.
Yeah, and they have to watch a bunch of videos to see it for themselves.
VHS
and sure enough,
videos.
I know, right? They watch a whole VHS video called Space, and it includes things like the Challenger blowing up. I don't know where you were when Challenger blew up. Do you remember where you were at? I mean, we were all in school at the time, but do you remember where you were at in school?
I was coming out of gym, going to lunch, and a bunch of us who were 86, we would have been 15. I would have been just 15. My best friend was a year older.
Yeah.
We were all, we heard about this, and we were joking and talking about how, man, I wonder if you could go up in space because you see like bloody parts flying around in space. And we made one of our classmates cry because she was very invested in Commander Sally Rock.
Yeah. That was the thing. So many teachers. My mom was actually, she was in like the top 50 finalists or something to be part of the program.
And I want to tell you this. This is true. People joke all the time. What made Generation X people so tough? When we were 12 or 13 years old, the school got us super excited about this mission, put us in a room, had us watching this mission live, and then that happened.
Yeah, we didn't watch it.
Process that.
Yeah, well, we didn't really process it.
Well, we had to.
So
we had to come up with something.
And, I think internal processing, probably. I mean, there was certainly no group discussion because I remember we were
I'm not saying that everyone our age is screwed up, and that a lot of us have made weird transitions in our lives where we've made our hobbies or our obsessions the closest thing we have to a personality. I'm not saying that because I own 80,000 comic books, but I can also tell you this is part of the reason why we're messed up. Cosmic Boy.
I was in study hall, and we knew that the Challenger was going up that day, but it was like no big deal because we'd already seen back in whatever it was, 1980, we watched the first shuttle going up in 3rd or 4th grade, whatever it was. And so this wasn't that big of a deal. And then the person who was in charge of our study hall room, who was also our cross country and track coach, comes in and he's like, hey, you guys need to listen to this. And he always made a point of turning on the radio to NPR or something during lunch so that we could listen to it while we goofed off. But we listened to the aftermath. So we didn't get to see it live. And then right after, when it was time for lunch, we had an open campus policy where you could go off campus to go eat lunch.
Oh,
so some people, there was no restaurants in town. So either people ran home to eat lunch and came back, or we went down to like the local grocery store and grabbed candy and ate that. But like my friend Mike
and sticks and a Malibu.
Yeah, that was lunch, right? My friend Mike, he ran home and he watched everything on TV, all the stuff while he had lunch. We all ate lunch, and then we all went to the library because when you were done with lunch, you still had free time. And so we went to the library, and our librarian had set up the TV for us all to watch the replays and everything. And then after that, it was just like, okay, let's go finish the rest of our day, and let's go and do track, whatever it was. Spring, it would have been track. Yeah. And then, talk about it for a few days. And that was about it as far as on our minds. It was not something we dwelled on.
There was an announcement in my high school. They actually made an announcement over the PA. And it was about 10:30 in the morning Central Time.
Yeah.
And we were just going to lunch because we had lunch like really early. But yeah, it was one of those things that I don't at the time remember being terribly affected by it, but the more I think back, I'm just like, man, what was wrong with us? I'm like literally listening in my mind to the things that my friends and I were saying. And I'm just like, what in God's name was wrong with us? And I'm
I
like,
think it was
I
just
was in
because
with
it
a
was a,
bad crowd.
no, I think it was just that we were, it was a national news story,
Right. And we
but
were cynical teens.
no,
We
I don't
knew
know if it was
everything.
even cynical. I really don't. With
Well,
our
we
guys,
were for
I know
sure.
we all listened to the news and we watched the stuff and we were like kind of shook up, but then it was like, okay, this is a terrible tragedy, but it's time to keep going. That's totally different from
Mhm.
9/11 when, I mean, I remember, hearing, I don't know, a blip or something, because I would also turn on the TV in the morning in my
Right.
office. And so I always had CBS Morning News or something playing. And, that radically changed so much that all classes were canceled at the university where I was teaching. And I think the next day
Yeah.
we didn't have classes because people were so shook about that. And then in 2003, which is the second shuttle disaster, the Columbia one, I
Mhm.
think my wife and I were maybe a little bit more shook up about that one than we were the 86 one. But to
Yeah.
just even reference the shuttle disaster in a comic in 1986 by DC
Yeah.
seems also, just like you were saying, you were hanging with a bad crowd and you were a cynical, 14-year-old Matthew. I think that's DC kind of comes off maybe a little
It
callous,
it had been
unthinking in this. I mean, in hindsight, it's not Doctor Doom crying as the shuttle
right.
blows up in the background.
Oh God. It had been 7 or 8 months by the time this book hit the stands. I remember this book hitting the stands, and my main takeaway from this was kind of a fascination with those real world elements because I had grown up on Bronze Age DC and the fact that they're using Reagan and they're using in this issue the real Challenger disaster that we know
Hmm.
about, the real, 3 Mile Island or Chernobyl, I guess they refer to in here.
Yeah, that was another one.
These,
I
yeah,
just don't. I remember Chernobyl, but I just don't
mhm.
remember it being in the 80s. For some reason, I always thought Chernobyl was late 90s or early 2000s. And
I
it
think you're
still
thinking of
blows.
a different
No,
power plant disaster.
no, to me, it was Chernobyl. It was just like, I remember waking up and it was like, I don't remember if I was in California or Atlanta at the time, but dumping tons of concrete on the plant. And I was just like, that's really weird. And then, it's probably one of those Mandela moments where I'm like, I swear this happened, 20 years ago, not 40 years ago. But yeah, they're using all
Right.
these things, I think, quite effectively. They make a reference to Insane Irving, an electronics store, which was a reference
Insane
to,
Irving prices are out of their
yeah, it's
mind.
Crazy Eddie's is what it was in New York, which was kind of this big deal because he was selling stuff for rock bottom prices. And you need to go
Mhm.
look up the Wikipedia on Crazy Eddie and his downfall because lots of scammy stuff going on. But I mean, my understanding is if you lived in New York, New Jersey in the
Mhm.
1980s, you couldn't get away from a Crazy Eddie television commercial. And so it's
Right.
interesting to see that pop up here, but nobody else outside of New Jersey, New York would even know what this is about. Uh, Finally, the other thing that is going on in this issue is that there is another shuttle launch about to happen, and it's got nuclear batteries on
Payload.
it or something. They got some nuclear stuff on there, and people are afraid that if it blows up, it's going to scatter radiation all over the United States. Of course, it does blow up, but Cosmic Boy is able to stop it. Of course, he gets blamed for the shuttle disaster. But there was
Not just
actually,
stop it. Stop it with the biggest spring in the
there
world.
you go. I know.
It's like a 50. Oh God,
I'm
I
sure you
hated
loved
it.
it. And then,
Stop
but
the
there
destroying.
was, and I forget what the year it was, but there was actually a event where they were sending up a satellite, and I forget which one it was, that was powered by nuclear batteries or had a radiation powered batteries. And people were
Mhm.
concerned about this very thing. So I don't know if that was also in the 80s or if that was just DC looking ahead. But I do remember it was a big deal when people found out. I think maybe it was one of the Mars rovers was going
Mhm.
up with a nuclear payload, and people were freaked out about that. So
Hmm.
yeah, yeah.
That's weird.
So yeah, he gets accused and beat up and shot at. Apparently, they're using ceramic bullets or something because his his sprung powers don't stop the bullets, and he gets hit a couple of times.
I wonder if they're actually lead.
Could be.
Is
but
lead ferromagnetic?
No. So, yeah, it's an interesting issue. I want to see how the rest of their adventures to the past play out in a coming issue.
If you enjoy the show, we would appreciate your support. You can find out more and become a Legion Clubhouse member at patreon.com/major spoilers. Legion of Superheroes Volume 3, Number 33, Forgotten Planet. Published April 1987. Written by Paul Levitz with art by Greg LaRocque, Mike DeCarlo, and Arne Starr. Synopsis. A prison break and a secret plot mean a galaxy on the brink of interstellar war.
Okay, now we can finally get back to a Legion issue, Matthew. Legion number 33. More mind-bending shenanigans. This time, though, we move the focus away from Saturn Girl, and we focus on Chameleon Boy as he tries to figure out what's going on.
It's actually pronounced chameleon.
Yeah, whatever.
But, I didn't mention it when we talked about Cosmic Boy in the first half of the show, but both this issue and Cosmic Boy number 1 feature Steve Lytle covers, and they're gorgeous. This is such a beautiful cover. And I look at this cover and I'm like, oh, these guys are great. Then we get to the interior.
You're not even done with Crisis on Infinite Earths, and you have to make an Anti-Monitor reference on the cover. Also, it's nice to see Yondu. It's nice to see Yondu on the cover, too. I didn't know that the Marvel and DC were crossing over back then.
You do not ever refer to Yondu Udanta, one of the noblest men in the Marvel universe of Earth 691, in the same breath as Atmos.
I didn't. I just said that Yondu is on the cover.
I will end you. I will fight.
You don't like Atmos, though, especially in this issue.
Sucks. Atmos is terrible. And this is the first time we really get a good look at Atmos. And Atmos has been for lack of a better word, I know you hate when I say MacGuffin, but he's really been the MacGuffin of
the sure. That's how they got a bunch of Legionnaires to go track him down and get off planet, etc.
That's how they took care of the dumb but inhuman guys. Your Tellus and your Quislet and your White Witch and your Wildfire. Mm-hmm. But this shows the very first time that Atmos transforms from just a guy with an 80s mohawk to a giant flying guy with an 80s mohawk and, for some reason, transparent pectoral muscles. And I will never understand.
Maybe they turn into the atmosphere.
I will Atmos your sphere. The thing about it is the design could be interesting if it was something where, do you remember Danny Chase's Phantasm costume?
Oh, yeah, I didn't really watch Danny Phantom that much, but I know who you're talking about, yeah.
The Teen Titan, Danny Phantasm. Titan.
I thought you were talking about Danny
floating
Phantom.
Gloves, but no arms.
Yeah.
And I like a character where you see where their arms and legs should be, but they're gone. But for some reason, just having his shoulders and chest muscles be transparent is he first of all disturbing.
Arm fall off boy or something? Is he the anti-arm fall off boy?
His arms cannot fall off boy. But the design of the costume, first of all, I don't know if this is a Greg LaRocque design. I don't know if this is a Mike DeCarlo design. I don't know if this is a Steve Lytle design, but I will tell you this, and you're going to hear it a lot because Atmos is going to be a part of this book for the rest of the run. Atmos sucks, and the visual of Atmos is both disturbing and confounding to where I look at it and I'm like, not just why would you draw a man that looks like that? How do you draw a man that looks like that? And the answer is 100% true and honestly, inconsistently. So, yeah, Atmos sucks. That's going to be.
But you also don't like him here because there's some implication that he's been fooling around with
Dream Girl.
Dream Girl, Shug. Yeah. He's been messing with me when I'm under the mind controls.
Here's the thing. I don't know if the blame that Atmos is creepy.
I don't think it is. I don't think it is.
Universo is creepy.
No, but we don't. So that's the thing, right? It's certainly if Atmos, who is clearly under the control of the Spy Eyes, again, a stupid name. If everybody is under some kind of hypnosis, then he's not in control of his actions. So we need to find out if this was a mutually agreed upon thing, if something in their hypnotic programming when they're on this planet is them saying, hey, you must mate and procreate or whatever kind of nonsense that could be going on here. I don't think in this case that either of them is to blame, Dream Girl or Atmos, especially if they're not in control of their actions. So both of them, in my opinion, have been violated, and I don't think it's just Atmos's fault.
Here's the thing, though. The pioneer of hypnosis, Franz Anton Mesmer, MD, PhD, 1815, I think he croaked. Mesmer's the main
oh yeah, no, he wanted to do it to control women. Yeah. No, he wanted to control young women.
You can't make someone do something that they wouldn't normally do.
That's not what Mesmer wanted. Mesmer wanted to control young women to have sex with him.
To do stuff, exactly. But here's the thing. He found out he couldn't get them to do things they wouldn't normally do. So Atmos, under the control of Universo, being creepy, ipso facto, that's creepy to me.
I know you can't use in this case, if that's the case, then obviously Dream Girl is a fraud, and so is Saturn Girl is a fraud then. Okay. I think in this case, if you're looking at hypnosis or mind control or whatever that's going on, you have to accept that it is the pop culture take on mind control. In which case, again, Atmos and Dream Girl are not responsible for the actions while they are under. But yes, Mesmer is kind of a creepy dude, and people need to go look up mesmerism and see what his whole deal was.
So what we're going to have to chalk it up to is Atmos and Dream Girl are both sex positive characters. They may have a focus on the carnal arts, and so together they may or may not have gotten up to a little shenanigans, not of the time travel variety, but even so, that's just messed up.
No, I look at this whole issue because, especially when they break out and they start tearing up the place, and we find out all the stuff going on with the Dominators and stuff, that this issue is really all about the deep state controlling the world, especially when we find out about Universo doing this. It's not the man on the stage, because it's not the president of the United Planets. It's the man behind the man who's running everything. In this case, Universo. Yeah. So, and also, you may say, oh God, don't bring up, the deep state, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you have to remember, in the 1980s, thanks to Reagan and thanks to the FCC at the time, where they're deregulating a lot of what's going on with radio, because AM was really struggling at the time. AM's counter to FM was talk radio. And in the 1980s, you start to see this rise of conspiracy theories ramping up for two reasons. Number one, there is a lot of, the deregulation of media, specifically radio. Rise of Rush Limbaugh, rise of Art Bell, rise of, Ian Punnett. Ian Punnett wasn't around yet. But you have the rise of all of these people that are leaning heavily into conspiracy theories, some many anti-Semitic, that this feels right in line with don't trust the government. That's even a 1960s kind of an ideal, but it's in this issue where I think it's like, don't worry about the president. Worry about the people who are controlling the president.
Well, and you know that the vice president throughout the Reagan era was one George Herbert Walker Bush,
former CIA,
former director of Central
Illuminati, global one
even
world
if you
order.
Don't believe Illuminati, one world order. I mean, even if you set all of that aside, there is documentation about the chicanery that Bush was behind, and the things that Bush and guys like, I don't know, let's say Henry Kissinger. Some of these characters were doing around the world. And we know that George Herbert Walker Bush was part of that Reagan administration. And that Reagan administration, did they deregulate specifically so that they could get the information?
Of course.
But I'll tell you this.
That's what it all is.
When Reagan captured the Legionnaires, he screwed up. Because Saturn Girl broke through their mental blocks.
That's the thing, right? This is the second time where we've had the man behind the man, right? Because remember, when in the Booster Gold issue that we talked about,
That's true. Yeah.
The bad guy there didn't want to replace the president. He wanted to replace the vice president in order to get a new president elected with him as vice president, so that then the president could step down and he could become the president of the United States. So we're seeing the same kind of story going on. And so there's definitely a rise in conspiracy theories, a great deal in the 1980s. And I think people need to understand that a lot of it has to do with deregulation of media at the time.
So what if we presume that Senator Henry Ballard did successfully replace, in this universe of the New Earth, he did successfully replace George Herbert Walker Bush? You have to say it like that. It's the law. And that's why the universe is messed up. That's why Cosmic Toy is dealing with this.
It's definitely a revolting situation. But
right?
Hey, we could go on and on about conspiracy theories, but we need to get back into this.
We will.
We get to see everybody fighting good old Gil Dishpan. That Simpsons character, Gil Dishpan.
Ugh,
they get to fight him.
You know, Zamir is like Tellus's Joker. And oh my God, that must depress Tellus, because it depresses me. Zamir is like, what if Yoda was a kitchen sponge? I do not care for Zamir.
Actually, in this case, the good old Gil Dishpan is a sea cucumber, is what he would be.
He's a Gil Dishpan.
I like White Witch when she goes all Green Lantern. She's like, in deepest sea and darkest space, prepare my spells to punch your face. In case of fight, beware my anger, White Witch's might. And then she's like, gets transported to another place.
And
in fact, they all get transported to another place. Yeah.
Yes, they do. And one of them, Wildfire, gets dissected. Fortunately, he doesn't have a body, but
yeah.
It's a whole thing.
I have a question about this issue. Also, we get to see the heavies take on the Dominators and probably start an intergalactic war. But I wonder, does this issue feel like? I mean, there's a lot happening here, especially when the people of Savage Island suddenly break out.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that this feels like a drawn out second issue, like a filler issue? To you?
I don't know that this issue and last issue are paced in a way that I like. And I know why they did it, because they wanted to focus almost entirely on, Danger Island, Ochongo.
Yeah.
But there's also that problem where last issue we got a little bit of a little tease of, Zamir is waiting in the shadows on Hycraeus, but all of a sudden, bam, when we cut back to Hycraeus, we're in mid-battle.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Zamir is attacking Wildfire, and we get about 2 pages of that, and then he teleports them all away. And it really feels like I was like, did I miss an issue? Did I miss some story? And we didn't. We cut from Zamir in the shadows to Zamir blahaha in media res. And I feel like part of that is the way they kind of paste these and cut these stories together, because it feels like Earth is already under Universo's thrall. We see Element Lad and Siobhan are just hanging out on Earth, and they're just like, oh, okay, things really are so much better now. Oh, they're totally mind controlled. But Mon-El and Ultra Boy and Block aren't 100% controlled in this issue.
Right.
And it feels kind of like Return of the Jedi. Fascinating things are happening on all fronts, but if you try and rectify the time frame in which they happened, because it's been 10 minutes for Mon-El and Ultra Boy out on planet Zetragon 4, but Saturn Girl keeps referencing having been trapped for weeks, or how long have I been away from my family? And Atmos has been missing for a good 3 issues before this crossover started. So obviously, the culling of various heroes. By the way, there's a lot of new superheroes introduced on the prison planet, and you know what? One of them
hear from them again.
One time, 10 years from now. Yeah, it's nothing. It's just like, you get one girl who shows up again in 94, one girl who's never heard again, and then of course Senator Atmos Blutarski, Washington D.C. But it just, I'm so frustrated. And they introduced a girl called Silver Sword, right?
Yeah.
And her armor is gold.
Wicked witchcraft.
But I don't want to be the guy. I don't want to be the guy But I'm like, her armor is gold.
Yeah, but she's called Silver Sword. She's got a silver sword. That's the important.
Does she have a silver sword? Because it doesn't look silver to me. Okay.
I mean, it's white, so. You know.
I'm reading the original first. And also, I'm just saying, my colors are okay. They're not great, but they're okay. Yeah, and then Atmos gets to be all like, look at me, I'm Atmos. I'm the best and the greatest and awesome, and I'm going to fly everybody home, even though I have no armpits. How do I shrug my shoulders? Nobody knows. Cool.
That wraps it up for this installment of the Legion Clubhouse. Matthew, what did we learn this week?
We learned that President Desai is the kindest, bravest, warmest man I've ever met in my life.
I think we also learned that my hair feels like it's been shampooed in mud, Shug.
And most importantly, I think we learned that Chameleon Boy shares your feelings about Dream Girl, so you're not the only one who just constantly talks about her behind your back.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us this week on the Legion Clubhouse. Questions, comments, thoughts, ideas, you can hit us up on our socials. You can send us an email, or even better, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/major spoilers. Patreon.com/major spoilers is where you can get a bunch of bonus content and support this show. Until next time, remember, it's a long way from home to go alone. Take this.
And I'm Ionos.
The Legion Clubhouse is a production of Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC, and is produced by Steven Schleicher. Your hosts were Matthew Peterson and Steven Schleicher. You can follow Matthew at Mighty King Cobra and Steven at Major Spoilers. You can follow this podcast on Twitter at Legion Clubhouse. If you have questions or comments, send them to podcast@majorspoilers.com. I'm Jason Inman. Until next time, eat it, Grandpa.
This podcast is copyright 2024 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.